The Constitution created basically a new form of government. It created a government with three branches that all had the power to check and balance each other. It basically meant that each branch had some ability to stop the other two branches from becoming tyrannical, right? Because tyranny was a major concern for the framers. This system is often called the separation of powers, referring to the fact that national power was separated among three branches. However, this is often better conceived of as separate branches sharing powers, right? These three separate branches all share the national power. So the executive branch can execute the laws. They can command the military and conduct foreign policy. So this is the president's branch. There are other people in the executive branch, as we will talk about, but the president heads it up. Now, the legislative branch actually makes those laws that the executive branch executes. The legislative branch also controls the purse. That just means they control the money for the government. And they can declare war. So we can see that the legislative branch, which is Congress, both the House and the Senate together, they have quite a bit of power too. So they create the laws, but the president gets to decide how those laws get executed. The president can also veto a law that the legislature passes, but the legislature can then override a president's veto. The president executes the laws and commands the military, but those things need money, right? Well, the legislative branch controls the money. The president can command the military and conduct foreign policy, but the legislative branch controls whether we declare war or not, which can limit how much power the executive has to actually do things with the military and foreign policy. That said, the president, as commander-in-chief with the power of the sword, does have a lot of power over what the military can do, even if there is no formal declaration of war, which means that they have a lot of power to keep the legislature in check, even if the legislature has chosen not to declare war. Now, I've ignored so far the judicial branch. The judicial branch, the Supreme Court and other federal courts below that, interpret and evaluate the law. What this means is that if the legislative branch creates a law and the executive signs it and then begins to execute it, if a legal case comes through the court system and winds up at the Supreme Court can say, no, this law is unconstitutional. You can't do this. Or maybe they say, the law is fine. Legislative branch, you did a good job. But Mr. President, you've been executing it all wrong. The way you've been executing it is not in accordance with the law as it was created, or not in accordance with the Constitution. So they can check the executive. Likewise, if they did just declare the whole law unconstitutional, that would be checking the legislative branch. So you can see how they have a lot of power to keep the executive and the legislator in check. However, those two can check the judicial branch. Let's say the judicial branch declares a law unconstitutional, as they did with the Defense of Marriage Act, which defined marriage as between a man and a woman. That, because of the Supreme Court ruling in Obergefell v. Hodges, is according to the court not constitutional because it violates the Equal Protection Clause, among other reasons. Now, that seems like a pretty ultimate check on the executive and legislative who passed that law, except if the legislative branch doesn't like it, what they can do is start the process for a constitutional amendment that would constitutionally define marriages between one man and one woman. At that point, the judicial branch would have to say that something like the Defense of Marriage Act is constitutional because it would be written in the Constitution. So there are ways to check the judicial branch. Another way is that the executive actually appoints the judges on the judicial branch, and the legislative branch gets some say over who the executive appoints because they can approve or not approve nominees. So you can see how this system of checks and balances allows each branch to use their portion of the federal power in order to prevent the other two branches from becoming tyrannical.